on the MMA World Facebook page. Thank you for joining me once again here on the program. I will be joined shortly by my co-host, Kayla Beatty. And boy, if you joined us last week, we obviously had a host of stuff to talk about, and that's going to continue on this week's program where pretty much all the stuff we talked about last week, we're going to talk about this week. Plus, we're talking about, of course, UFC 218 from this past weekend, the Ultimate Fighter 26 finale, Bellator 189, EBI 14, and Glory 48 all happened this past weekend in the combat sports. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then, of course, coming up this weekend, we have Glory 49, along with Glory 49 Redemption, the pay-per-view, Rico Verhoeven versus Jamal Ben Sadiq. So we got to talk about that. Also, Bellator 190 as well as Bellator Kickboxing 8 is this weekend. And another UFC fight, UFC Fresno, headlined by Cub Swanson against Brian Ortega, a.k.a. T-City, going down on Fox Sports 1 from Fresno, California, this weekend as well. So a host of stuff to talk about. Super excited to do it and super excited to be back here on MMA World going live for everyone to check out. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can check out what I'm doing at Jim Graham on Twitter. Also, the official Beyond the Cage Facebook page as well. And I'm obviously right here on MMA World. My co-host will be joining me here in just a few minutes. She is Kayla Beatty. You can follow her on Twitter at fangirl_MMA. And I believe that's her Instagram as well. So a lot of stuff to talk about. Super excited that we're going to be able to do it here again live here on MMA World. And once again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to troll us, whatever you want to do, please comment in the box below and we will do our best to answer and go off of your comments in a timely manner. And it's okay if you kind of go off topic. That's okay too. It'd be nice if you stay on topic, but if you have a question that you've been just dying to ask someone in regards to the world of combat sports, we're going to do our best to answer it too. So comment below again with any questions or comments or concerns you may have as we go along in the broadcast. Where I'm at, it's noon Eastern time here in the United States. Specifically, I'm just outside of Detroit, Michigan. Kayla will be joining us on the West Coast from California. And if you're watching from the UK, I believe it's 5 in the afternoon. But regardless, this is MMA World. I thank you for tuning in live here and joining us. So let's bring in my co-host, Kayla, now. We're going to bring her another show here on MMA World. Hello, how you doing today, Kayla?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Of course, telling everybody what we're going to cover on this week's show. And once again, much like last week, a bunch of stuff for us to talk about. We're going to
So
try to
much
do our
going
fit it in about an hour, 15 minutes.
on. Yes, lots to talk about, but lots of exciting stuff. I'm excited to recap the weekend, especially after you got to have so much fun out there in Detroit.
Oh man, it was, first of all, and this is a little bit of me bragging, our brand new arena downtown, Little Caesars Arena. And I'd be like, oh, I'm just saying this, we have a nice arena. But legitimately, I believe we have, like, for 20,000 seat arena, not big football or soccer stadiums, I'm just saying like smaller size arena. I believe we have the best arena in the world. And I don't think
Yeah.
that's an understatement. Just there's so many cool things to check out, just the way they lay it out. We were sitting in the upper deck, which even according to a Little Caesars employee, she was like, "Oh, that's going to be bad seats. You guys might want to rethink that." It kind of got me nervous about my purchasing decision. But when we got to our seats, the upper bowl seats are very like steep, which is good. So you're not like sitting back. And we're also sitting what I would consider for normally it's used for the Pistons and the Red Wings would be like center ice or center court. So we were
Okay.
right onto the cage, and we basically got to look right down into it. And I thought we had fantastic seats for being like the cheapest seats you can get. I thought they were fantastic. So that to me changed my whole view of the arena. Was there's not really a bad seat in the house, and for paying, UFC is probably going to be a little higher than a regular Pistons or Red Wings game. I thought was very cool. And as far they announced it as a sellout, it looked like there was a lot of people there, one effect that they have in the new arenas, because so many people are checking it out, a lot of people aren't always in their seats. So,
Right.
so that's even come to where the NHL and NBA has actually complained to the Pistons and Red Wings, saying, "Hey, get people in the seats."
We
It's
need
like,
to
yeah, it's great you guys have this new arena, but yeah, we want to see people out there. So it's kind of created a weird effect where a lot of people are out checking out the bars and restaurants inside the arena. But overall, it was a fantastic experience. We had great seats, and really, regardless of where you sit, when they get in close, they're doing the ground fight, and you have to kind of look at the jumbo,
Right.
shot anyways. It was pretty awesome. I'm glad that they were able to come back here after 7 years, and hopefully it doesn't take 7 years for them to return to
Yeah. Yeah, well, it almost sounds like the arena was made for MMA, because I totally know what you're talking about. The few events that I've been to, it's always a bummer when you're at that like one level where you're like looking into the cage, but you can't, like you said, it's nice if you can see into the octagon for the fights instead of having to watch the judge the whole time.
Right, and that's just me. I mean, everyone has where they like to sit, but for me, I like to sit above the cage, preferably, unless you're literally like where like the commentators are, like Joe Rogan and John Aiken and Dana.
Right.
You're right. That'd be the only other seat I would trade in for. But other than that, I'd like where I was sitting.
And it looks like too, depending on what news we cover, because obviously, like you said, we have a lot to talk about. You got to go to a lot of the pre-fight, like the fight week events, and I noticed a few pictures with certain champions or former champions.
Yeah. So they had Metro PCS is one of the big sponsors with the UFC, and they do a lot of in-store like meet and greets. They had 4 for this event. I was able to get to 3 of them. The one I didn't get to was with Demetrius Johnson. That's because where it was at in the Detroit area is like I live on what you would consider the west side of Detroit, and this store was all the way on like the extreme upper east side of Detroit, which I consider almost like another country. And trying to get to that part of town from where I'm at during like 5-6 o'clock, which is rush hour, it just didn't seem like a good idea. And also the one I did get to go to, the last one, the one with Cody Garbrandt, by the time we got out, it was already 4:30. So I think it would have been very unlikely to make it there in time. So that's the only one I didn't get to go to. But yes, I met former champion Cody Garbrandt, Detroit native Kevin Lee, which was really cool. And of course, current champion Tyron Woodley. Were the ones doing the official in-store signing. And there were a host of other UFC fighters there. They showed in the crowd and stuff. So a lot of people were there for this event. I think it garnered a lot of attention, and deservingly so.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, do you want to go over some of the fights, or, it's your show. So
I wanted to kick it off with 218. So I already gave people a brief rundown what we're going to cover, but as far as a rundown for people how we're going to do it, we're going to start with 218, then we're going to move to the Ultimate Fighter finale, then we're going to talk a little Bellator 189 and 190 coming up this weekend from Italy, then a little bit about Glory, just going to touch on that, as well as EBI, and then we're going to translate and end talking about this weekend's UFC event in Fresno with T-City taking on Cub Swanson. We're going to pick the main card for that too, so that's how the program goes. Peter actually commented, said Woodley looks good. It was actually funny when I handed him the photo to sign, because that's what they do. He was kind of like, "Who's this ugly guy?" And he was pointing to himself, and I was like, "Oh, come on, you look fine." And so he was already kind of making fun of himself, and I even let him know these things were moving pretty quick on that one. There was a lot of people there. I just kind of like, "Hey, I just want to let you know, I know a lot of people gave you crap for the Damian Maia fight, but I mean, you had to do what you had to do. The guy tried to take you down 23 times.
Yeah.
And you gave him a big old goose egg. So I feel like you did what you had to do, man." He goes, "Thanks, man."
I'm glad you said that, because that always frustrates me. I mean, Damian Maia is one of the best, if not the best guys, BJJ guys in the promotion, and to defend 23 takedowns, that's so impressive. But anyway,
yeah, and then I'm also going to bring up here, if I can find it. Here we go. So I want to bring this up before we even get to the fights, Kayla. Now, this is from our local paper, the Detroit Free Press. It did get tweeted online, It's written by Carlos Menares. This is Detroit Free Press as part of the USA Today network. So I want to quote who it is, and I'm actually reading from the paper. This is direct quote. This is the headline: "Attention, UFC : If you return to Detroit, bring it." So apparently, this reporter, he was not happy with the quality of the 13 fights he saw at Little Caesars Arena.
Oh my gosh, Carlos!
And now that's just the headline, Kayla. I haven't even got into what he's talking about here. But this was put online, obviously, in Twitter. And I saw comments and retweets from Mick Cain, Joe Rogan, and Dana White, all obviously big people, all basically bashing this guy. And not to mention a whole host of fans, including myself, bashing this individual, because it was clear that the Free Press, which I normally would consider a pretty good local paper, did not send someone that's high up in their sports writing department, number one. And number two, someone that has either never seen mixed martial arts or is already hugely against the sport. And I feel like you can tell in this article. Again, Carlos Menares, look it up. If you type up UFC 218 Detroit Free Press, you'll probably see this piece. The reason I want everyone to read it is because I think this is someone who's supposed to be kind of doing a /opinion/recap, and you can clearly tell is a huge negative bias towards the event. And I wouldn't say unanimously, because obviously this guy disagreed, but I would say the majority of fans, media, and even the company would agree this was a fantastic event.
It completely delivered. He sounds like he was one of those people that wasn't in his seat and was checking out all of the bars and the amenities that you said the stadium has. Really,
I mean, even
send you out there every time.
So here's just one episode. I'm not going to go and read the whole article because everyone, like I said, just Google it and check it out yourself. But here we go. So this is just a quick episode. By the way, New York, which was UFC 217, got 3 title fights, including one with UFC legend George St. Pierre. Detroit got 1 measly title fight, and it wasn't much of a fight at all. Defending featherweight champion Max Holloway dominated has-been Jose Aldo from the start on his way to a third-round technical knockout. Holloway even got to goad Aldo into engaging action. Yawn.
Yawn? Oh, my God.
Yawn. It actually says yawn. That's not me adding a sound effect or anything. So if that it doesn't get leveled, that annoyed me after the fight. I see that someone from my own local paper, it really angered me. Yeah. And because this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. They built up Madison Square Garden to have 3 title fights. Not every pay-per-view is going to have 3 title fights, let alone 1. Okay?
Right. And like a comeback from a legend that's been on hiatus for 4 years. Come on.
Right. Not to mention, this was an injury replacement, too. Jose Aldo was originally scheduled to go there. That's not the UFC's fault. Injuries happen. Do I think the main event would have been way more exciting or drastically different with Frankie Edgar? Potentially. I don't know if it would have made for a better fight, but that's the UFC's fault that Frankie Edgar, so they went with the best matchup they could do in lieu of that injury, which to me was Jose Aldo. To me, that was the best fight to make. And then you got arguably not only the knockout of the year, but maybe the knockout of like the century. I know we still have 83 years left in the century, but I mean, the Francis Ngannou against Alistair Overeem was absolutely incredible. Not to mention Justin Gaethje and Eddie Alvarez, and not to mention on the undercards, Yancy Medeiros against the Brazilian Cowboy. My goodness, I don't know what this guy was seeing to not see any entertainment in that night.
Yeah. If that didn't live up to his expectations, I don't know what's going to make him happy. I think the best thing to do is maybe we can leave his Twitter handle at the end of the show, and we should all just tweet at him statistics, different facts of MMA to try and educate this guy, because he seems like you said, just maybe he's not very knowledgeable in the sport.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can find it. I remember responding to it, but if I can find it, I'm gonna link it and put it in the comments down below.
Hey guys, thanks for joining. We have some people saying hello.
Oh yes, hello everybody, and thanks for tuning in this afternoon or evening, wherever you may be here on MMA World. Jim Graham, Caleb Beatty, joining with you here. All right, let's get to the actual fights here. Real quickly on the undercard, of course, we had 8 fights on the undercard here for UFC 218. Really good performance by Justin Willis to kick off the night, first round knockout. A lot of people were kind of down on his last fight. A lot of people tuning in from the UK, you probably remember, wasn't that great of a fight. I believe that was over on the Scotland card. And I feel like he kind of redeemed himself, and against a guy I would consider another quality up-and-coming heavyweight there in Alan Crowder. Being able to take him out, I think, was pretty impressive. Dominic Reyes, boy, 205 doesn't have a lot going on right now. It's very top-heavy. There's a lot of guys at like the top 5. But seeing a young guy like Dominic Reyes come in and have 2 fantastic finishes, both in the first round, he is definitely, and he's 6'4" too. He's not a small light heavyweight. He is a guy I'm looking at as the future of this light heavyweight division, division right now that needs some young talent to kind of be infused. And it seems like it could be this guy training under the tutelage of Joe Stevenson.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, like you said, we just have some new guys coming in, and they're performing well, and it's exciting to see them on these big cards, because now it has people, watching. I wasn't too familiar with these 2 guys, but now that I've seen their power and their skill and potential, it's got me excited. Because like you said, that division needs some new guys to come in and stir things up a little bit.
And for Jeremy Kimball, probably drop down to 185. I mean, it's trying not to be mean, and just looking at his frame compared to Dominic Reyes, and not even really getting to a big height and reach, just the frame, I think he'd be more suited for 185. So I think that's something that after this fight, I think that's something he's going to have to work out. Maybe if that means he has to ask the UFC to kind of catch 195 maybe, but I think that's something he should consider, because I don't think his future is at 205 pounds.
Or you never know if they do start, embracing these new divisions people are talking about.
Or if they make a 195, it is possible, because if you think about it, that is the biggest jump between weight classes of any division, 20 pounds. So yeah. If any division gets added, a 195 would make a lot of sense. Yeah. Also, hometown girl Amanda Cooper completely dominated Angela Magana. And I told you this, Kayla, I said she needed to go out there and have a big win, because this, I felt, was kind of a do or die fight for Amanda Cooper. And not only did she get the win, like I said, went out there and dominated. She was very emotional after the fight, obviously fighting in her hometown, Detroit. And I thought she delivered. She did exactly what I thought she was going to do. And for Magana, I know she's trying to complain, saying sexism, and when the reason the fight was stopped, which is complete BS, because if you look at the fight before, another hometown guy, Sabah Hamasi, he completely got jobbed by Herb Dean. And he's a man, so I don't know where she's getting this from, and I think this case is going to just get dismissed very quickly. And I think it's just someone that's bitter that she got beat up by Amanda Cooper. I think that's more what it is than anything.
Yeah, I think she was a little probably embarrassed by the performance, because, like you said, she was just so dominant. And Amanda Cooper physically looked awesome when she walked in. I was, not that she hasn't before, but she just looks like she's really. I think, like you said, she knew this was kind of a do or die fight, but she physically looked great, showed us a variety of her stand-up and ground skills. And I think with, Angela Magana, I don't know, some people have argued that she had a lot going on, because obviously she lives in Puerto Rico and there's a lot going on still down there. But it looks like she's kind of focusing too much on the talking and the drama and Twitter and getting into fights there, and maybe should focus more on what she's doing in the octagon. Because, I don't agree with, her saying it was an early stoppage.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, she, chose to live in Puerto Rico very recently. So it's not like someone that has been living there for years or something like that. And I'm not trying to belittle her or the people of Puerto Rico. I'm just saying, she's trying to say, oh, woe is me and all this stuff, but it's kind of like, that was her choice. She was in San Diego for many years training with Alliance, and because of her attitude, she got kicked out of that camp. That's why she's no longer there. So this is a person that's had trouble, I'd say, being personable, I don't know, getting along with people, being a nice person. So a lot of the problems in her life has kind of been created by her own, and that's translated to a career. And I think that it's probably one of the reasons why she's 11-9. I mean, and is probably now going to be cut by the UFC. I think no one just really wants to deal with her. And, and it could be a simple fix if she just started kind of, I understand talking trash. There's a difference between talking trash and I think just being a bad person. I think there's a fine line between those two, and I think Angela Magani is siding more towards being a bad person than just simply talking trash and trying to promote a fight.
Yeah, her focus just seems off. But I was really happy for Amanda Cooper. Like you said, it was a win that she needed, and it got me excited about, just who she's going to face next in the division because she looks great.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a question from our friend James Anthony.
Hey, Jay.
Any advice how you guys break into MMA media and how do we get our start? I started in college radio for me personally, and then I just started putting my stuff on the internet. Whether it was bad, I'm sure some of it is bad. It might be bad right now. But that's the biggest thing I can say to anyone trying to get in any type of sports media or talk show or anything is just to put your stuff out there and try to review what you're doing. That's the biggest thing I can say after doing forms of broadcasting since I was 17 years old. I'm now 28, so I've been broadcasting sports for 11 years. And that's the biggest thing I can do is, and don't get caught up by anyone that a hater or trolls. Don't get caught up in that because some people are just going to just say, your stuff sucks because they think it's funny. And other people are going to say it just because they don't like it. And that's okay if people don't like it. But take that and use it to get better. Just do the best you can every time you're doing a broadcast, and I think you're going to be okay. And really, it's just also, as far as you're saying breaking in, just if you see something you like or you want to interview someone or just ask. Worst thing they say is no. And if they say no, just keep on trying. Eventually, someone's going to say yes in something. And just take those little victories. But because it can be discouraging, because I've gotten no a lot on interviews and shows and websites and all that, and it can be discouraging. But if you stick with it and you're really passionate about it, you don't care how many viewers you're getting. You don't care if you're making any money. You're doing it because you like it. And that's why I'm doing it. So if that's any helpful to James or anyone else that's looking into career in broadcasting, that's my little 2-cent advice for everybody. I didn't know if you wanted to chime in as well, Kayla.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you're saying. I think that, like Jim said, if you're passionate, people are going to notice that. And especially with sports, you can be someone that's all about the statistics, facts, commentating, an expert in the sport, or you can be someone that's just a fan and loves the story and journey of a fighter. So bring your 2 cents, what you're bringing to the table as a fan, as a reporter. And like Jim said, don't get frustrated if you're hearing no, if you, like you said, have trolls, what have you. If you're really passionate about this and this is something that you want to report on, people are going to want to listen to you and they're going to see that passion. So like he said, I kind of have done the same thing. I just continue to put stuff on the internet. I try to educate myself on the sport every day, whether it be watching a fight, keeping up on current news. And I just try to use my social media platforms now to kind of be a part of this community and educate new viewers on the sport to try and get them involved. So I would suggest the same stuff is just start putting out content, and we'll be sure to watch and follow you.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to last fight on the other card. Obviously, I got to say, my third Detroit guy on the card, Jakar Close, I'm going to be honest, very disappointed in his performance against David Tamar. I know David Tamar is very good. I'm not trying to discourage his talent, but for a guy that was really being hyped up, obviously having the tattoo of the state of Michigan right there on his chest, making it real obvious he's from our state, I didn't feel he delivered, in my opinion. I thought he was caught up in too much trying to get the crowd in to try to go David Tamar, into standing in the center of the cage and banging it out. And David Tamar, that's not his strategy. He struck from the outside. He was very hard to take down. I thought David Tamar did an excellent job in this fight. And I feel like Jakar Close, that's a guy he could beat. I don't think he was less talented or not at the same skill level as David Tamar. I just think simply he didn't bring it, and I think he got up too much in trying to feed into the crowd, and I think it backfired on him. And I think this is the first loss of his career, pro career. And I think he's going to learn a lot from it because guys at the higher level, they're going to do what they want to do. You doing this is not going to goad them into that. And if it does, then they're not as good as we thought they were.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was a little confused. I know that sometimes people like to mentally mess with their opponent, do a little bit of that in the octagon, but he just seemed a little too distracted with like you said, maybe trying to put on too much of a show for his hometown, but in the end, it kind of bit him in the ass a little bit. And I was a little disappointed too, because I wanted to see more of the skill instead of that show. I don't know if it's called showboating or what have you, but yeah, and like you said, to have your first loss in your pro career in your hometown on that stage and that platform is just kind of a bummer. But I think, like you said, he'll learn from the experience after hopefully he watches tape.
Also, I just, in the comment box for everybody, was talking about that article from the Detroit Free Press, that very scathing review of UFC 218. I just posted it in the comments.
Okay,
so now
cool.
Everyone will get to check it out. So if anyone's interested in what that man had to say, or at least get a nice laugh out of the deal, I posted that in the comments for everyone to check out. It officially says MMA World, and you'll see the link. It says freak.com, all that stuff. So last thing on the card, Yancy Medeiros against the Brazilian cowboy, Alex Oliveira.
Oh, man.
I know a lot of people are going to talk about Alvarez Gaethje, and deservingly so. That was also a great fight. But I think why I would say this one's just slightly above it, if you're looking at like fight of the year or candidate, is just because of the swings of momentum. The fact that Alex Oliveira looked like he had Yancy Medeiros dead to rights there in the first round, and how Yancy Medeiros was able to like stay on his feet and somehow get that thing into round two, I don't know. I think it was not luck, but I think just determination. I don't know what Hawaiian fighting spirit. I don't know what you want to attribute it to, but somehow he got into that second round. Then he started to come on, and then Cowboy came right back, and then Yancy Medeiros came right back, in that third round with the knees, with the punches, and then finally put, Oliveira away. Absolutely fantastic, and both of them are deservingly of getting that extra $50,000. It was absolutely fantastic, especially coming off of two fights that were, like I said, the Drakkar close fight and the fleece-haired Courtney Casey weren't, they were all right fights, not horrible, but coming kind of off of those two kind of ho-hum fights, you get this. It really, I think, brought the crowd back to life.
No, and it's so funny that you say back to life, because these are the fights, because especially one of the things I love about this sport is this is a sport that individually will show someone's heart. You can have that skill, but when you see these fights where someone is like resurrected from the dead, like you said, going back and forth, where we think the fight's finished, and then all of a sudden, something changes and twists over to now all of a sudden the next guy you think he's finished, and this back and forth, it just gets people so excited. And I went to an amateur fight earlier this year where it was a very similar thing. We thought one of the guys, was about to get TKO, and he was resurrected, and next thing you know, he had the second round, and it went into the third, and it was just so close. And we had everyone in the whole arena like up on their feet for these two guys. And I just think this is these are the fights that we wanted for 218. We want these guys to come out and use this opportunity of having one of the bigger platforms of the year to just go out there and bang. And I think that it was so great to see these two guys, especially, who have quite a few performance of the nights and fight of the nights already under their belt, but they're really some of the most exciting guys in the division. And there's a reason why, they're ones to watch. So yeah, great fight of the night. I love that the UFC gave out two, or I guess 4 bonuses, because it was well deserved for sure.
And then we got a couple of comments from Tony. He also agrees that Drakkar close fight was a letdown. Then we got a comment from Joe on the Freep article. He said, did Jim Edwards write it? No, Jim Edwards did not write the Freep article. But nevertheless, it was a bad article. So if you want to say that was Jim Edwards-esque, that's your opinion. I'm not going to say it, but if you want to say it, Joe. But yes, it was definitely pretty scathing. All right, getting to the main card here, kicked off in the strawweight division, Tecia Torres against Michelle Waterson. Mm-hmm. I think this was a very nice win for Tecia Torres. I think the fact that she was able, for the most part, take this fight to the ground, where I would have considered Michelle Waterson the better ground fighter, the better grappler. The fact that she was able to go into those situations, not get caught in any submissions, really keep herself grounded, land some good ground and pound. And when it came to standing, I think the biggest difference, even though Waterson is a little taller and a little longer, Tecia Torres is very put together. And I mean that she has a lot of muscle, even though she's only 5'1". And I think that kind of size and strength, I think, threw Waterson off, and I think that's the one con when Waterson moved up to from atomweight to strawweight. So she's not quite as strong as some of the other women in this weight class. And this is one of those matchups where when you get in those 50-50 positions, she was kind of losing out a little bit. And that was that was a big X factor for Tecia Torres. She took advantage of it and was able to work through those ground situations. And I thought stand up did very well when it was striking, to get in range and not allow any height or reach disadvantage to affect her. And I thought this was a very solid performance. Again, she didn't get a finish, so I'm not sure if that leads right to a title shot. Again, that's probably the biggest knock on her career, is the fact that she doesn't get a lot of finishes. So while she did get the victory, I think she probably has to take another fight to get a title shot, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I felt like Michelle seemed a little off, and I think the reason why is, like you're saying, I think she just wasn't ready for the strength of Tecia Torres. And I was a little confused when the fight went to the ground, where I thought Michelle would be more dominant. I just think that, like you said, the strength and stuff kind of threw her off. And but that's my biggest thing is, people want to immediately say, and we have Joe even asking too, can she go all the way and win the gold? We have people, suggesting that Tecia should be next for the title shot. I think we even saw, I'm sure you saw, you yourself do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but we even heard Joe commentate that there were some flaws that we saw Tecia, have while she was on the ground. And I think that to go and immediately give her a title shot against Rose right now, I think would actually not be a great move for her career, because I think we see this potential of someone that could possibly be a title holder later, but I think she needs a few more fights and experience with some of the top 5 ranked girls. And especially now that we have a champion, I think, her name was being thrown around just because she was one of the only ones that hadn't fought Joanna yet. But I think now that we have a new champion, to give her that rematch with Rose right away, I don't think is a good move for her. I think she needs a little bit more experience.
Absolutely. And of course, they already booked Carolina Kovalevich against Jessica Andrade for early next year. So that, to me, is probably going to be a title eliminator.
Yeah,
I would winner that, especially when you look at Kovalevich has a win over Rose Namajunas. So I think that's probably going to be who fights Rose next. I think they're going to wait to build that up. And then because of that, I think Joanna then needs a fight to try to get back in contention. And so that could set up Tecia against Joanna. And if she beats Joanna, even if she doesn't
right there, yeah.
finish, I mean, I'll have to bring it over, but I have a picture right over here of Joanna. So I'm saying I'm a huge fan of her. So if she can somehow get by her, you have to give her a title shot.
Oh, for sure.
So I would say that's probably the most likely opponent for me would be Joanna. The only other girl I could really think of her taking on would be Claudia Gadelha.
Right, but who says that she's on taking a little bit of a hiatus break herself?
Right. All right, let's get to the next fight of the evening, which was Eddie Alvarez against Justin Gaethje. You and I both said this was the fight we were most looking forward to of the whole night, and it absolutely delivered. These two guys did exactly what we thought we were going to do. I know I put a little hint that, maybe we'll see what Eddie Alvarez did against Anthony Pettis. I know I put a little hint in some people's minds last week, but I'm super glad that didn't happen. Yeah. And these two, very little grappling the whole night. I don't know if there was I'm bringing up fight metrics. I'm trying to see if there was even a takedown attempt by either of these gentlemen. But from what I can remember, there was very little. It was just a lot of throwing, a lot of in close in the pocket too. Gaethje didn't really use his range. I mean, he had good kicks, but it wasn't anything stopping from Alvarez coming forward. Really, a lot of uppercuts, a lot of single collar tie, clinching, dirty boxing, a lot of stuff like that, and it was just fantastic. And I think one of the great things about this fight, especially if you look at that closing sequence in the third round, I think Eddie Alvarez took like 3 uppercuts or something in a row from Justin Gaethje, and it was like, it's not looking good for Eddie Alvarez, because I feel like he was winning the majority of the fight, and then he took those couple uppercuts, and this is when Gaethje comes back, this is when he gets his 16th knockout or whatever, this is when he stays undefeated. Then about like 30 seconds after those uppercuts, he seemed to recover. He got back into that clinch again where the fight was a lot, and then he landed that knee, And boy, man, Justin Gaethje, for a guy that has never been lost and has never been put away, obviously, to see him go flying across the cage and the referees him, it was insane. And just a heck of a finish by Eddie Alvarez. And if anyone thought that Eddie was done after his fight against Conor McGregor, and even that was a no contest against Dustin Poirier, I think it's safe to say Eddie Alvarez is very much a threat at the 155 division. He is not done yet.
Yeah, we have our own Peter Knox here saying a comment right here too. I was wrong about Eddie. He proved me wrong and showed me he has the heart of a champion. It's so true. These guys, I mean, they told us they were going to give a show. They told us it was going to be violent. We absolutely got that. I know that I have seen a few people make comments about now they're worried about Justin Gaethje. Is he kind of an easy opponent to figure out his game? Or maybe now that he's suffered his first knockout, is he going to kind of learn? But I know a lot of people are saying the way that he's fighting now, that the deeper he gets into the division, the higher ranked guys, are they going to be able to kind of figure him out? Jim, what do you think about that?
The only thing I will say is for a fight where I said there was very little, fight metric is saying it's temporary unavailable, so I can't bring up the official statistics, but I think he tried maybe 1, 2 tops takedowns, and this is a guy that was an All-American wrestler, so there's other sides of his game that at least so far in his UFC tenure, he hasn't showed. If you go back to his World Series fighting days, he would take down guys a lot and dominate them, and he didn't really try that against Eddie Alvarez. And so I think that's a whole part of his game that he has yet to showcase in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and that's going to add another layer to him. But I think he knew that Eddie was going to be a tough guy to take down, and he felt confident in his power and stand-up abilities that he would be able to get the job done. And he came close. I mean, let's not act like just because he got knocked out in the third round that Justin Gaethje didn't have an overall good performance. Yeah, he could probably tighten up his defense. Yeah, he could probably use his range. Yeah, he could bounce around. You know, there's little things he could change, but I mean, he did very well. And he lost to a former champion and a guy who has knocked out many a men in his career. So there's no shame in losing to Eddie Alvarez. Now, I think Justin Gaethje is going to take some time. He's going to recover. Both guys, I think, are going to recover because they definitely took some hits. Probably not going to see him again until the summer. But I think for Justin Gaethje, it's just little things. And I think just on that night, Eddie landed the, not the punch, but you saying that as a metaphor, he landed the one hit, one punch that turned the tide. And sometimes, more times than not, in Justin Gaethje's career, it's been Justin Gaethje. Just this time, it wasn't him.
And you know, he has a certain style where he's going to go out and bang and give us an exciting fight, give us fight of the nights, win these performances, and that's what we love about him too. So, but that, like you said, that's exciting to know that he has other layers, and the fact that he's only 2 fights in and already has this much hype around him. Yeah, I see him going far and doing well too. Let's see what Tony Clark says. Tony Clark says, I thought it won't lie. How do you think the Poirier rematch goes if it happens? Yeah, do you think that Eddie's next fight will be a rematch with Dustin?
I hope so, because I thought that should have been run back right after it happened.
Right.
So I'm all on board with that. And I think the way that Dustin, because Ben, again, common opponents, if you look at the way Eddie beat Anthony Pettis and you look at the way Dustin Poirier beat Anthony Pettis, it's a big difference.
Right.
So I would say the winner of that very likely could face, I guess right now I'm going to say Tony Ferguson as the active champion of the UFC. I think that's very likely. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on with Conor, with Tony. You know, I know Khabib takes on Edson Barboza. That probably would be first opportunity shot at Tony Ferguson, would probably be the winner of that matchup. And I would love to see a rematch between Edson and Tony, because we all know how that happened the first time they met. And it'd be amazing to see what those two on a full camp against each other would do. I think Tony took that fight at like 3 weeks' notice or something. So I'm very excited for that. And right now, despite what Conor McGregor's doing, going on date nights with models or whatever he's doing now, I think the lightweight division is going to be just fine. And we have a lot of fantastic fights lined up. And Tony, I do think that should happen. And as of right now, many months out, I'm saying at least 6 months, I would favor Dustin Poirier, but my mind may change when we get closer to that fight.
Yeah, that's an exciting one. I definitely want to see that again just because of how their previous fight ended. We need to see those guys go out there and bang too.
All right, and then we're just going to kind of gloss over this fight because it was definitely the snoozer of the whole card, not just the main card. Henry Cejudo against Sergio Pettis, and I had a feeling this would happen. I like Sergio Pettis. He is definitely one of the young up-and-coming guys in this division, but it's really hard to stop a guy with that level of wrestling when you're not really considered a grappler yourself. And I think this was going to be a really tough fight for him, and it showed. He wasn't able to stop the takedowns. Cejudo was able to stay on top and kind of land pillow fist. I mean, this was kind of a vintage Cejudo performance. I know, Kayla, you and I talked about how his stand-up game has evolving, but realistically, why chance it against a guy that's also a very stand-up when you have that gold medal wrestling in your back pocket? You know, he took the path of least resistance. I don't blame him. He got the win. Wasn't very exciting, but really because of this division not having a huge list of contenders that Mighty Mouse either hasn't faced or hasn't beat, just getting the wins is going to get him back to that opportunity to fight for a championship. So beating Sergio Pettis, regardless of how exciting or lack of excitement that it was, is going to put him in a good position. And that's really all he had to do, plain and simple.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that he has a plan. It seems like it's a slow and steady plan because we even heard him in the post-fight conference. He's not really pushing for that title shot next. It sounds like he kind of understands where the business is at, that they want to see that DJ TJ fight. So why not kind of, I don't want to say coast to get that next title shot, but why risk it too much? Like you said, he just knew his wrestling would be a lot more dominant. And it's interesting because with Sergio Pettis, like you said, he's so young and skillful in his own. But that division's tough because when you have such high level wrestlers like a DJ, or I'm sorry, not, or yeah, Demetrius, like the champion, and Henry. I guess I don't know if it's just going to be more training and experience to be able to figure those guys out, or your takedown defense, what have you. But Sergio, still looks pretty good and has a long career ahead of him.
All right, let's get to the co-main event. We kind of touched on it earlier. Maybe the knockout of the century, and we still got 83 years left in the century, as Francis Ngannou took on Alistair Overeem. I don't think that's that bold of a claim. You probably have seen the pictures around, the fist and Overeem like this.
Memes and gifs.
As a guy that likes to collect memorabilia and sign photos and stuff, that one I would display, not even signed. I'd love to get a sign, but I'm saying that's how cool a picture that is. It's just such a marquee moment. If you want to show someone what is MMA about, show them this picture of Ngannou and Overeem. It's just fantastic timing because Overeem throws a combination. He's kind of ducking and moving around, and then you see Ngannou just time it perfectly with the left uppercut. And I'm sure people have even seen the photo edits. I don't know if you've seen any of them. They kind of make his arm like the Iron Fist. They make it all glowing yellow. I've seen ones where they show where Overeem's like this. They show his soul leaving his body.
Rest in peace, Overeem.
And after this performance, they've already announced it for UFC 220, Miocic versus Ngannou, and deservingly so. I think this is the fight that fans want. I think this is the fight to make because I'm convinced Cain Velasquez is just never going to fight mixed martial arts again. He just can't stay healthy. And so if we can't get the matchup that makes the most sense rankings-wise, not ratings-wise, rankings-wise, and Cain versus Stipe, and you add in, Cain being the former champion and all that. If we can't get that fight, this is the fight to make. And we have arguably the two best strikers in the heavyweight division right now, both coming in the prime of their careers, and I think it's just going to be absolutely fantastic.
So real quick, I just want to ask you, what was the energy like in the stadium after that knockout happened? How quiet was it? How crazy and loud was it?
It was electric when that hit. I think everybody stood up on their feet. Everybody was cheering, and if they didn't know who Francis Ngannou was before this fight, they sure as heck do now. And that's why that article I read from the Free Press was so disappointing, because he was talking about lack of stars. We just saw a star born in Francis Ngannou. And
Yeah.
so for him to discredit that, that's why that's why that piece was trash. And that's why I threw it on the ground, because that's what it is. Because this guy is legitimately a star born. And he definitely has the tools to beat Stipe Miocic, who, if he beats Francis Ngannou, believe it or not, sets the record for most title defenses in heavyweight history with 3. Because that's how crazy the heavyweight division is, that he can have the most title defenses at 3. Jose Aldo, who we just saw lost at his height, had 6. So, I mean, just to put into perspective, and the heavyweight division was the first ever division in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. So for that to go on all these years with no one defending their belt 3 times, the fact that that could be erased because this kid, Francis Ngannou, is absolutely incredible. And that's what makes this fight so intriguing coming up. And he is absolutely a star. And you could tell in the post-fight interview, he seems like the nicest guy ever. Does not seem like a dude that is just a straight up monster. And also his speech, I would say it went on a little rambling, but he had his hands around the microphone there with Joe Rogan. You're just like, there's nothing Rogan can do. Those guys' mitts were on that. I was like, there's literally nothing Rogan could do to stop that man from holding that mic and saying what he wants to say. And just to add to the scariness of this dude. And it was just an absolute incredible performance. And we definitely saw a new heavyweight star. A division, again, much like light heavyweight, needs some young blood injected to it. And we got just that with Francis Ngannou.
And, just to add to that, too, I think we all wanted to see Stipe and Kane fight just to add to Stipe's legacy of beating these older veterans of the sport. But I think that if Stipe can pull off a win over Francis Ngannou, that might very well, could be arguably just as good of a win to just add to his legacy, just because of Ngannou coming in and taking out these guys in the fashion that he is. If Stipe can get him past those first couple rounds and figure him out, I mean, that's going to be insane.
Absolutely. We got a couple comments from Joe. Hope he doesn't turn into John Jones or Connor when the money rolls in.
Oh, no, not.
From what I've seen, though, this guy doesn't seem like that type of guy. I really don't. I think I think Connor, even very early on in your career, you could tell it was a guy that was very motivated by money. And for John Jones, I think since success came so young to him, he did what all young people do. They party, they do things maybe they shouldn't, and it kind of got him in trouble. The good thing for Ngannou, we say young guy, the dude's already in his mid-30s.
Right.
I think once you're already in your 30s, you kind of are who you are. And so I don't see Ngannou change that much. Maybe he does, but I feel like he's already a nice, humble guy, and I feel like he's going to continue that even if he goes on to become champion.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, main event of the evening, Jose Aldo against Max Holloway. We had a comment earlier from James Anthony talking about Conor Holloway. I want to get to that in just a second, but I want to talk about what Max did. Very similar to the first fight. The biggest difference was Aldo was a little more conservative in the first round, trying to save his energy. And I actually probably would have gave Aldo the first round. I think he performed really well. But once again, Max didn't quite rope-a-dope as much in this one. But it was the one thing about Max, and I think he has such a great strategy. A lot of people are following this now. He throws the punches and bunches. He throws those half-power shots and accumulates the strikes. And then when the third round came, that's when he was throwing the fastballs, 100% shots. And it completely changes your defense because you're just taking these little pitter-patter shots and you're like, oh, this guy doesn't hit hard. But then he turns it up on you and you don't know where it comes from because you just saw for 10 minutes, you figure that's what the guy's featuring. And that's not what he's featuring at all. He's completely setting you up. And he just does that so well, maybe even better than anyone who does it. A lot of guys, Michael Bisping's done that in his career, TJ Dillashaw, the Diaz brothers, Carlos Condit. A lot of those guys have that strategy. But right now, Max Holloway is doing it maybe even better than those guys. And he's doing it at a very high level. And it's just so hard to combat that strategy because just mentally you're feeling those shots. You're feeling they're not doing that much damage. And then when you get a hard shot, you're like, whoa. Where did that come from?
Right.
And Jose Aldo, at this stage of his career, he's not able to make those adjustments, the counter with speed and footwork that he used to. And lo and behold, we end up with another third-round knockout, and Max Holloway successful on his first title defense.
Yeah, and like you said, he has his game plan and how he executes it. It's on champion level. That's why he's the champion right now. And I do love that he credited that he did receive more of the Jose Aldo leg kicks, and he said the first couple that he threw, I said, oh, those weren't so bad, but then one hit, and he's like, that's what everyone's talking about. So I love that he did credit Jose for that. I think Jose looked good. His movement, head movement looked great, like you said, just better than the first time around. But we are seeing that he's I don't even want to say getting older because he's not that old. He's only 31. But we are seeing that there's other fighters that are just evolving past him, and yeah, Max is just on another level, knows how to break down these fighters, and I see him reigning for a long time.
Yeah, it just and not only to go on that, his toughness too, because he took a couple shots from Ali. You saw him in the middle of the fight,
That's
kind of
it. Yeah.
clap and acknowledge like that was a good hit. So I think that's another part of his success too, is the ability to take a hit, and I think that cannot be understated in the sport. So James Anthony had two questions. He had one, Connor versus Max. Honestly, I know this is probably not going to be a popular opinion, but I think right now on December 7th, 2017, I would take Max Holloway over Conor McGregor because of the role he's been on. Conor's been out doing God knows what. I think right now, Max Holloway, he is the man. And what's the old saying? You have to beat the man to be the man. Well, he just beat the man, Jose Aldo, not once, not twice. He did it in dominant fashion, and he even did it once in Jose Aldo's hometown. I'm not saying there's no challenges left for him or that he can't be beat, but he is right now just on a different level than these guys. And I think right now, I would take him over Conor McGregor. I know that's probably not a popular opinion, and I'm not trying to say Conor has no chance against Max Holloway, but if I had to pick a fight right now today, like I said, December 7th, 2017, I would actually take Max Holloway over Conor McGregor.
No, I agree. I think just overall, Max seems a little bit more focused in the sport of MMA. Yes, we know Connor had his boxing training, but we know that Max, like you said, can take a punch, can go in there and box it out. And that was the other thing I was trying to remember too. He's working with different nutritionists now. Just has a great team and camp behind him. And I believe in this blessed era. I believe in, he seems like he has a goal and a legacy that he wants to create and build for himself. And I don't see Connor going in there and disrupting that. I think Connor's a little too distracted with other stuff right now. And I think too, he needs to go in and focus on his division if he comes back. So I don't even really like that fight being put together for Connor's return.
Also had James saying, should UFC provide counseling to the young fighter? I think they do that in a sense. I know they fired some employees, but I think they got guys like Forrest Griffin, Matt Hughes, and I think Chuck Liddell in the past that were on the payroll to kind of help counsel these young fighters. They do the Fighter Summit every year where they bring in other athletes to talk to these guys. They have that Performance Institute. So I feel like they have stuff out there for people if the fighters want to go and seek it. So I think they do some of that as well. But thanks for the two questions there, James. Then we have Peter Knox saying, is Aldo finished? I think so. I think he's finished competing at a championship level. Now,
Yeah.
if he wants to go and fight, lower level guys just to continue to fight because that's all he ever knows, yeah, he could probably beat a lot of guys still in the top 10. I'm not disputing that. But as far as fighting the top, elite guys, I don't think he's doing that anymore. And honestly, the thing is, he could retire now. I mean, he's a legend in Brazil. I feel like he's still going to have sponsorship money. He can still do the seminar circuit, and he can still coach at Novo Now. There's still ways for him to make money. That's the thing. So I would say that's something he's really going to have to consider. I'm not saying that he has to do that right now, but for me, I don't think it would be that bad of a decision to step away. I think he has nothing left to prove, and I think that's the time to go out, is when you have nothing left to prove and you're not holding on, because that's the worst thing, especially in this sport, is seeing guys hold on too long and take a lot of unnecessary shots that can really affect their health later in life. I think all those really at that tipping point, and I think right now would be a good moment to walk away, in my opinion.
Yeah, if your three losses are against Max Holloway twice and Connor, arguably in their prime too. I don't think that that's going to be something that takes away from what Jose Aldo's accomplished. I think, like you're saying, if he continues to fight and lose to guys that I don't want to say are below him or anything, but even just if he does start taking fights on the lower ranked guys and starts going on a losing streak, I think that, like you said, that's just going to be harder to watch. But it really just goes down to, does he want to continue to compete? He is pretty young. So it's so interesting just because, he's accomplished so much already in his lifetime that it's hard, I'm sure, at his age to just retire from, his career. What does he do next? So it'll be interesting to see what he does. Maybe he should even take a little break for a little bit and come back if he wants to. And like you said, focus on other stuff. But I think that if he walked away, it wouldn't necessarily take away anything from what he's built. And like you said, he is already a big enough star in his hometown too, that he could probably just sit back and live a nice life.
All right, let's get to the Ultimate Fighter 26. We're going to try to fit in a lot of stuff as quickly as we can here before we get to UFC Fresno. Ultimate Fighter 26, I thought, was as a guy that's training jiu-jitsu, if you really like submission, this was the card for you, as I believe the
Arm
first...
bars.
I think, was it 1, 2, 3, 4... 4 out of the first 6 fights were submissions, and all of the first 6 fights were finishes. So that was absolutely fantastic, including, like you said, the armbar by Jillian Robinson. Then he had another armbar by Rachel Ostovich. Then you had the armbar by Montana. And then you had the incredible performance comeback win by Ryan James, who looked dead. I mean, he looked dead against Andrew Sanchez, and somehow came back to win that fight. Absolutely fantastic performance by him, and a comeback win over an Ultimate Fighter winner, tough guy in Andrew Sanchez. And then we saw a calf slicer, the second ever calf slicer in UFC history, and he did over a guy who is a very credible grappler and black belt, in Joe Soto, a guy who's made it to a final of an EBI tournament. This guy's a legit guy. And for our friends from the UK, you probably know about Brett Johns. I didn't know about Brett Johns, but I think a lot of people do now because the calf slicer 1 is a submission you don't hit almost ever. And the fact he was able to do it in 30 seconds against a guy like Joe Soto, incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. There were some moments there at Tough 26. Like we said, this weekend was just so stacked, but there were some really nice stand-up performances. I'll wait until we get into the main card too. I hope we get to touch a little bit on Sean.
Go ahead. Talk about Sugar Sean O'Malley as he was able to make his UFC debut as he took on Terrion Ware. What did you think about the Contender Series signee in his debut?
Yeah, I like him. I liked. I know that there's some flaws in his game, and a lot of people had a lot to say about I guess just his style, but I think that he's a really exciting young fighter. I think that there's a lot of potential there. It was a great fight, but I think that he's one of those guys too that and again, maybe because he's undefeated, he's a little gutsy and taking chances there, but I also think that his style kind of mentally will mess with his opponent, and I think we saw that especially going into the third. He kind of just broke down his opponent with his style of keeping his hands down but he's exciting to me. I think that we need these young guys and these young performances on weekends like this just to get us excited for the sport and what's to come next. What did you think of his performance?
I thought it was very good. He had a very good first round, and then the second round you saw Ware starting to kind of figure out, and obviously throwing a lot more. I think that was one of the biggest things he didn't do in the first round, because he was already the guy in the center. He was already the guy moving forward, but he actually followed up with the output. And then in round 3, I thought O'Malley made a perfect adjustment. He was still letting Ware come forward, but he was starting to cut angles a lot more. And those angles, throwing from those weird angles, I think got him the third round. Yes, he can keep his hands up a lot more. I would say that's probably the biggest criticism I had. But the way he cut angles, knowing like, all right, I'm obviously not taking the center of the cage, which is fine. But if you're able to cut angles and basically sidestep the guy moving forward in the center and land, you're going to have a lot of success in the sport. And so I thought for that, making that adjustment after having what I consider kind of a poor second round, I think really shows that this is not just some guy throwing crazy shots, throwing, punches from his waist. This is a guy that's actually pretty intelligent and a guy that listened to his coach's corner and was able to make adjustments mid-fight. Those are things that not a lot of young fighters can do. And for a guy that's 23 years old and only had 8 professional fights coming in, and I think taking on a solid guy in Terrion Ware, I think shows that he has a lot of potential. This is not just some guy throwing crazy strikes all over the place, and then they just so happened to land because he was taking on mediocre competition in the regional circuit.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get to the main event. Nico Montana against short notice Roxanne Modafferi, as Sarge Eubanks was not able to make weight, had to be hospitalized. So Roxanne, who lost initially in the semifinals to Sarge, she gets moved up. Lauren Murphy, who was supposed to take on another member of the cast, her opponent had visa issues, couldn't actually fly into Vegas that week. But Lauren Murphy, much like on the show, showed up, made weight anyway in the hope that maybe somebody didn't and she could fill in. And she got her wish. She was able to fill in and take on Barb Honchak in a pretty high-profile fight on the main card. And Roxanne got the opportunity to fight Nico. Nico performed very well, definitely deserving of the win. But the one thing I want to commend Roxanne for, and I've said this with you, Kayla, and I've said this on previous shows, not enough fighters, when they know they're down, go out in that last round to get the victory. And I think Roxanne did absolutely that. It didn't work out for her, but she went out, she tried her hardest to get that finish, and she came super close to that armbar. It didn't work out, but I commend her on their effort because more fighters need to do that. These guys and gals train way too hard to just have a lackadaisical final round thinking they're going to do what they've been able to do and have that translate into success. You need to go up a notch. You need to turn it up a notch, and you have to go in there and try to get it. It didn't work for Roxanne, but she went out there and tried to get it. And you got to respect someone do that because not enough fighters do that. It seems so simple to turn it up a notch, to go for broke. And I think too many fighters are worried about having a submission loss or a knockout loss and stuff like that on their record. But at the end of the day, a loss is a loss. And I think for Roxanne, I think doing something like that is going to build a lot more confidence heading into her career. A girl that kind of had some stage issues being on the big stage with the UFC before. And I think they absolutely proved that she belongs there because that's what you have to do when the chips are down is absolutely go for it. It didn't work out. She fought, I think, just a little better opponent that night, but she made her work for it. And I think that's what you got to commend in this matchup with Roxanne. Yeah,
she knew it was a main event. She knew that there was a title on the line. So you have to go out there and give it your all. And that way, too, that she can sleep and, sleep easily and rest nice, that she really tried to go out there and win that title. And I think that, like you're saying, when you go out there and continue to perform down to the last minute, it's going to get you the respect from the fans, from the company. It's going to keep you as a top contender. And possibly get her the rematch later. I'm sure, depending on how that division plays out and where everyone lands, depending on, if people are going to come down or move up, I think that she's definitely deserving of staying within the top 5 for right now and eventually getting that title rematch with Nico, or at least a title shot, depending on who holds it. But I was really happy for Nico. I was favoring her. I think that she... it was a very competitive fight. I just think that she had the slighter edge of endurance of getting through, those 5 rounds.
And really the only knock I had on Nico, there were a couple times where she initiated the ground game and I was like, what are you doing? And I think that was honestly the only negative. She took Roxy down a couple times. I was like, you're clearly the better striker, girl. Don't do that. This is what Roxanne is made for. She's a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And so that was the only time I was kind of like, but again, this is a young fighter. I believe this was her 7th professional fight. She's fighting for a UFC championship. Pretty crazy. So when you put that into perspective, and this was Roxanne's like 35th or something like that, when you put that into perspective, you go, all right, you're going to expect some mistakes. But luckily, she was able to not get caught in a submission, even though she was close a couple times. That's really the only negative in that fight was she took Roxanne a couple of times ill-advised. And I like to thank Phil for the comments, saying Sugar Sean's awesome and a great fight in the main event, and Barb is a beast even though she had to lose. But yeah, thanks for the comments, Phil. But yeah, that was the only really negatives I have. what I think the UFC is probably going to set up next, we have Paige Van Zant's floating out there, even though she's ducking Jessica Eye, which I don't like.
Yeah.
Jessica Eye does have a fight in St. Louis. I think there's a very real chance if Jessica wins that fight, being the former number one fighter in the world at 125 pounds. I think there's a very strong chance Jessica could get a title shot with the win. Obviously, with Lauren beating Barb, I think that's a possibility. Obviously, Sarge was supposed to get the shot, so possibly if she can prove she can make weight, you got to believe she's a factor in the division. And then someone who was just signed to this UFC that hasn't even fought, but she was the Legacy fighting champion at 125 pounds, is Andrea KGB Lee. I think is also a girl that factors in this division. So I think those are the couple options for Nico. And I think for a girl that basically came out of nowhere, she matured very quickly on The Ultimate Fighter, took out an absolute veteran in Roxanne Modafferi. And I think the fact where she is at her career, she's only going to get better. I think we're only at the tip of what Nico Montoya can accomplish. And I'm really interested to see how her career develops because I think she has a lot of potential to become a big star for the UFC.
I agree. And, I kind of laughed a little bit because I think I had either heard Dana White say in an interview or maybe it was something he tweeted, but he said after that win, he was just flooded with texts and tweets and different people reaching out saying that they wanted that next title shot against Nico. So it's going to be really interesting to see who they throw at her. But I agree. She's so young. That's what's so great about the show, that we have these people where, people thought it was assuring that maybe it was going to be Barb or Roxanne to be this new champion. And Nico came in, and was just able to dominate and get that title shot and become this new star. So I love stuff like that. I think this weekend showcased a few up-and-coming fighters that we need to pay attention to.
All right, let's get to Bellator real quickly. Bellator 189 and Bellator 190. Bellator 189, kind of a snooze fest for those fans there, especially on the main card. The undercard was pretty fire from what I've heard, and looking over the results, obviously, with so much stuff going on, I wasn't able to tune into the prelims live on Spike.com. But a lot of knockouts. I'm looking over the results here. A lot of knockouts, a lot of finishes. Sam Cecilia defeats Marcus Galvo, probably the most notable victories on the undercard. Then we get to the main card, 4 straight decisions. In the main event, Julia Budd, a fighter that normally is very dominant, likes to get on top, grind out her opponents, did not do that at all against Arlene Blenko. Very defensive, was content to stay on the outside, didn't really do much to change that position, didn't really even shoot in for much takedowns. And it's not like Arlene was doing something spectacular, but somehow the judges gave Julia Budd this fight. I think that was a complete disservice. I think even though the fight wasn't entertaining, I think the judges completely missed the boat on this. I don't know how you give Julia Budd 4 rounds, if I'm being honest. I think 2's even a lot to give her, really. So I think she should be very fortunate that she won that fight. I'd love to say, yeah, let's do a third, but since that one was so boring, it's hard to get up to really be egregious on Arlene because it was a boring fight. It wasn't a great performance, but I thought she won. But at the end of the day, I think everyone was kind of a loser in that fight because nobody really performed that. No one performed at a championship level that night in that fight. I think you can safely say that, and I can safely say that.
Yeah, it was definitely a little lackluster and disappointing, like you're saying. I don't know what was off with Julia, and there's the controversy of her coaches and stuff that was said in between rounds, or I think even after the fight. But yeah, when you're a main event, and especially over a weekend, which I think was kind of celebrating women's divisions with the tough finale, and putting a title fight on a main card, I was a little disappointed with, like you said, just the overall fight. And it's interesting that, I haven't really checked her Twitter, but it is interesting to see. It will be interesting to see if Arlene, kind of makes a big stink about that, hey, I got this rematch. A lot of people are saying that I should have won. I don't know, like you said, if it's worth getting a third fight, but very disappointing main event. And I guess with all these different fights that were going on over the weekend too, someone had to be the snooze fest, but unfortunately I think Bellator took that role.
Yeah, really, and all the fights were, and I hate to belittle all these men and women that put so much work into it. But the main card, anyways, was just not. David Rickles beats Piccolo. He's like, okay, he got by. Like Chidi beat Kata. Like, okay, he got by. It was nothing in that was like, wow, this guy. Oh, wow, he almost did this, or they almost did that, or she did that. It was just no really standout moments from that card. And unfortunately, I guess the good thing being in Thackerville, Oklahoma, is that the fights were in a casino. So hopefully the fans there in attendance were able to have some fun maybe after the fight, because they weren't getting it from those 4 main card fights. That's for sure. All right, let's move on to Bellator 189, which is also on the same night as Bellator Kickboxing 8. It's going to be over in Italy. And don't ask me how, don't ask me why, Alessio Sakara is fighting Rafael Carvalho for the middleweight championship. I think this is kind of an ill-advised title shot, in my opinion. I think John Slayton should be the man fighting for the championship. I think he's deserved it over the guys he's beat, and he's finished everybody that he's fought so far in Bellator. So I think Alessio Sakara, who even at his best was a mediocre UFC middleweight, I don't think deserves. I get it's in Italy. I get he brings the crowd. Yeah, I get he's a guy that's a banger. But, I mean, come on. Rafael Carvalho is really good. I mean, we all saw what he just did to Melvin Manhoef in that second fight. He really redeemed himself, I think, because of how bad that first fight was against Melvin. And he had a lot of blame on how bad that fight was against Melvin the first time. So for him to be able to come back and do that, he got more on my good side. So maybe Sakara has a puncher's chance, but Carvalho, I think, is going to disappoint a lot of Italian fans there. In Florence, I am excited to see Brandon Gertz. He's always a guy that brings it. He's never in a boring fight. He's taking on Luka Jelsic, if I said that correctly. And then obviously a girl Bellator is really trying to promote, and I think with a win could factor in to be the first title defense for Iliomie McFarland, that being Lena Ovenchikova, as she's taking on Alejandra Lara. So I think that's a big matchup to watch on the main card there for Spike from Florence, Italy. What about you? What are your thoughts on that Bellator 190 card, Kayla?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that, like you said, we're going to start seeing some of these contenders for that new division that Bellator is growing. So I'm excited to see Alina perform. And I agree. I think with the main card, it looks like it's more just to kind of bring a pull in, which we understand that that's what business they have to do. They have to, make sure they fill the seats. But, from what I've looked into these two guys, I think, like you said, it's just more of a puncher's chance, fighter's chance with the main event. But it will be interesting. You said that it's a kickboxing and Bellator 190 event, right? I can't find the kickboxing.
Yes, yep. Oh boy, we got
on the first troll.
First troll. What a stunning lady doing with a half-wit. Shut up and let the lady talk. All right, awesome. I appreciate that comment,
Eddie.
That's pretty awesome. But yes, it's the Bellator Kickboxing 8, which I think, by the way, is fire. You have Raymond Daniels, my favorite kickboxer, the real deal, absolutely a stud. He's taking on Giannis Boukis, who I'm assuming is Greek. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he's Greek. Then you got Joe Stitchem-Up Stilling. He's taking a guy by the name of Philippe Verlinden. Excellent matchup. Then you have the Australian legend John Wei Parr, who had one of the best, maybe the best kickboxing knockout of 2017 in his last Bellator performance with that head kick. Oh, excited to see John Wayne Parr. And then, of course, you got the Soul Assassin, Kevin Ross. I believe his fight and Raymond Daniels are both to defend their titles. And Kevin Ross has been nothing but dominant so far in the Bellator kickboxing ring. Of course, probably more notably known for being the boyfriend of Gina Carano. So a lot of people like watching Kevin Ross fight. But I think those 4 fights are going to be absolutely fantastic and a great I think that's right after the Bellator MMA portion. So if you haven't seen Bellator kickboxing, definitely stick around for after the MMA part, because I think that's a very good main card. It's one of the best main cards that Bellator could come up with their current kickboxing roster.
See, we need you to continue talking so you can educate me on Bellator kickboxing and what to watch.
I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic coming up, and I'm really excited for it. Raymond Daniels, he alone is worth watching. He's worth alone the price of admission. Just the way he can do those spin kicks and throw him at will. He's definitely a guy to watch, and I'm very excited to see him compete again, and hopefully he can follow up, which was a great performance, winning the welterweight championship in Bellator kickboxing in his last fight. We got a question from Phil. I'll let you go first on this, Kayla. Think about the heavyweight tournament that Bellator is starting with their first event here in 2018.
I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be fun. I think that it's going to get new and old MMA fans just excited about the sport again. Obviously, a lot of the sports started with tournament style, and I think that Bellator has now collected a good group of veterans of the sport. I think that a lot of those guys are kind of on their way out of taking just a few more fights. So why not kind of celebrate all of them in this heavyweight tournament? I really like the matchups that they've come up with too. I think that we'll see some exciting performances. I think that, or not so much exciting, but just fun. And I know some people aren't, total favorite of them kind of spreading out the tournament, but I think that it's smart business-wise of just kind of bringing attention to certain events that might not have that star pull or star draw to it. But what do you think, Jim?
I like the tournament. I think it's long overdue, about 3 years overdue for them to decide what to do with their heavyweight division. Because I thought at some point they should have just got rid of it because they weren't doing anything with it.
Right.
So I'm happy from that standpoint. Do I think it's maybe a tad long? Yeah, maybe. But the thing is, the last time Scott Coker did a heavyweight tournament, he had a host of injuries, and it's going to happen again. And that's actually why when someone said, who's your pick for the heavyweight tournament, I'm saying Justin Wren by injury replacement. I think Big Pygmy is going to somehow get in there. And how he's not in here is, I think, a huge disservice. I'm going to be honest. I think it's a huge disservice that man is not in there. And I'm not trying to take away from anybody that are in there. But the fact that not only is this dude a legit heavyweight, he's just a great story. And I don't know who doesn't like seeing the Big Pygmy compete. And I think he should be in over Chael Sonnen, not a heavyweight. Yeah. Brian Bader, not a heavyweight. King Mo, not a heavyweight. Rory McDonald is trying to get his way in here. Dude, you fight at 170.
Yeah.
Get out of here, bro. Come on. Like, let's be realistic. Justin Wren should be in there. And also another guy I'm not surprised, or a little surprised not in there, because he is a name, and I think does draw people to his fight, is Bobby Lashley. Mm-hmm. I know maybe he's not an elite contender, but he definitely brings ratings. I think that's been proven by his appearances on Bellator MMA. So I'm also surprised, if you're going for flashy guys like Chael Sonnen and King Mo, why wouldn't you throw Bobby Lashley in there? So, I guess that's two ends of the spectrum there. Those are two guys I think may somehow end up getting in this tournament one way or another, because I think there are going to be injuries. And because they've taken this time to do a year, you can't delay it more than a year. They're already putting it kind of as long as you can do a tournament. So that's why I think somehow one of those two guys will find their ways in there.
Yeah, and that would just be so funny, because I think that's what I keep describing this as. It's more of a fun tournament, like you said, just throwing in big names that aren't even usually in those divisions. It'll be interesting to see if it ends up being a true heavyweight that goes in there and ends up winning the title. But either way, I think it's going to be fun. I like the idea of bringing back tournament styles. Who knows if other promotions might jump on that. I think that I'm even noticing in the amateur world, I've just recently worked an event where they're doing a national tournament for amateur fighters. And it's fun. It adds to the cards.
I think so. I love tournaments, whether it's one night or whether it's over a series a month. And I think that's something that Scott Coker said when he took the job at Bellator was, I'm not going to do the tournament style Bellator has been doing. He goes, but I'm not going to do zero tournaments. He's like, I like tournaments. And so I do like that. I think it adds, other major sports, especially here in North America, have a playoff system. And so we don't really kind of have that in MMA. And this is about the closest we can get to having that. And so I think that's fun. And that's why a lot of people like buying in, because it's something they're already familiar with. They're familiar with having a group of teams, just group of individuals competing to have one big championship or big money grab or whatever the case may be. So I think that resonates with everyone here in North America. And so that's why I think it's a cool thing to do. It really draws interest and can draw in casual fans that maybe normally wouldn't follow if it was just a couple of random big heavyweight fights. But now that it's set up in brackets, I think that helps bring in the casual fans. And so that's why I think it's great for the sport, is you get that crossover bracket picking, betting appeal that, you know, other sports have with their playoff or championship system.
Definitely.
Real quickly, because we can't cover everything, but I want to give a shout out to Invicta 26 is this weekend on Fight Pass from Kansas City. LFA 28 this weekend on Access TV. And also One Championship 66 Warriors of the World on pay-per-view from Bangkok this weekend as well, in addition to UFC, Bellator Kickboxing, and Glory Kickboxing. So I want to give a shout out to those organizations as well. Just, man, there's just so much stuff to cover, and we're already running behind. We're trying to get it as best as we can, but I at least wanted to give a shout out to those 3 organizations right there. Did you have anything else you wanted to add on those, Kayla?
No, I think, like you said, there's just so much going on, but I like that you gave shout outs to that. Obviously, next week, maybe we can cover if there are some stand-up performances that we have to discuss. But let's see. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about EBI.
Yeah, real quick.
I know we're live, and this is terrible. I might have to run to the other room and grab my phone charger really quick.
No, go for it. Go for it right now.
So
I can talk about
maybe you
EBI
can take the reins. I'll be right back.
All right, Kayla will be joining real back, but EBI 14 was this Sunday on UFC Fight Pass. Was the absolute tournament bracket, won once again by the man, a.k.a. the King, Gordon Ryan, who trains with Gary Townend, Eddie Cummins, part of the Danaher Death Squad over there in New Jersey. Absolute stud. Was able to win his 4th EBI tournament. And this already includes the year where he just won gold at the ADCC tournament. And this is a great tournament to watch if you want to go back and watch, not just to see Gordon Ryan, one of the best in the sport, do it, but this was a fantastic final. Him against the Australian Craig Jones, who Craig Jones, by the way, maybe one of the best EBI non-winning performances, non-championship winning performances I've ever seen. Heading up to the final, he had 3 matches, I think, that lasted a combined like a minute and a half. Against other high-level black belt guys, and he was able to put them combined like in a minute and a half. And then he got to the final against Gordon Ryan. One of the best EBI matches I've ever seen, and went into overtime, and also the closest I've ever seen Gordon Ryan to losing, which I didn't know was possible, if I'm being honest. I didn't think anyone was going to come close to touching Gordon Ryan in this tournament. And not only did Craig Jones touch Gordon Ryan, he came like this close to beating Gordon Ryan. Like the closest anyone, I don't know, I shouldn't say may ever come, but the closest like anyone's to come in a very long time. And I hope in some tournament, if it's EBI or if it's another one, that these two rematch, because Craig Jones is definitely a guy that is right there with Gordon Ryan, and he really opened my eyes. And I'm really excited to see Craig Jones in other tournaments, because he proved that he is one very good jiu-jitsu practitioner. And so for that, it was exciting for me to someone kind of rise up to the level of dominance that Gordon Ryan has been in, and just be right there, because so far nobody has been right there with this guy.
I was going to say, I watched a little bit of the highlights and had read a little bit on there, and it looked like a new star was born there too in Craig Jones, and he almost got him in an armbar, right? And
oh my gosh. Oh, I don't want to spoiler alert, but my goodness, how Gordon Ryan did not tap from that armbar, I have no idea. We talk about like Ryan James and Yancy Medeiros. I think that was just grit and determination. That was not like technical jiu-jitsu for a guy that's high-level black belt. And I didn't hear anything that any arm broken or ligaments, but I mean, as a guy who's been put in arm bars myself and has kind of hurt my elbow from being sitting, that hurt watching. And I don't know how he got out of it. I mean, Craig Jones did everything right. He was moving. I mean, it's kind of just bad luck. I mean, Craig Jones did everything he could to get that arm bar and somehow didn't get it. And then, of course, what does Gordon Ryan do next overtime? He submits him with his rear naked choke. So just a fantastic matchup. Go on. If you haven't watched it already, go on Fight Pass. Actually, an incredible night of jiu-jitsu. So the whole night was good. I watched it all last night, start to finish, and was amazed. A lot of great performances. But yes, man, Gordon Ryan, he's just a stud. I don't know how else to explain it, because no one should have been able to get out of that armbar.
And you said that he had interest, or he has interest in going breaking into MMA eventually, right? Competing in MMA?
Yes, he does. I mean, at 22 years old, already being this good of a grappler, you got to believe if he can have any competent striking, he's going to. And the thing is, it's no-gi jiu-jitsu he's been mastering too, which is going to translate better than gi. So you got to believe that this kid can do it. And he's young enough that he can pick up those skills and mature. And I would say by 2019 at the latest, we'll probably see him take a MMA fight. I think that's, I would say at least, and I say he probably has one more year of just doing grappling competitions, and I think he'll make the crossover because Gary Tonon's already starting to do it, the guy who gave him his black belt. So I think it's going to be a year or less for him making the switch as well.
That's exciting.
Then we also had really quickly Glory 48 this weekend from New York. We saw the kickboxing debuts of two former UFC fighters in Thiago Silva and Chris Camozzi. Both were able to get wins. Thiago Silva's fight was a little closer. Chris Camozzi absolutely dominated. You could tell he was just that much better than this guy. I'm really excited. I think Chris Camozzi can actually, right now, is at a championship level in Glory. I think he's, you add in his endurance, his toughness, and the fact that he only has to fight for 9 minutes and he has to do zero grappling, which was probably always the worst aspect he was at MMA. I mean, Chris Camozzi has a lot of potential, and I think he could compete with Simon Marcus, with the champion. Actually, we're going to see the middleweight championship get defended this weekend, so we're going to be able to see, if he's on the same level as Alex Pereira and Belgari. Obviously, his teammate Justin Jacoby, and I feel like he can compete with those guys, and we're going to see some of those championship fights right here as my computer screen froze, so I can't bring up what's the official card. But we also saw, I told you about that fight, Bayazov and Van Nostrand in the main event. I didn't lie, did I? I mean, you saw Nostrand get dropped trying a flying knee right as the bell rings. He gets dropped. He comes back. And just lands an incredible left hook that just knocks out Baizanov cold. And this is all in 1 minute. This might have been the best 1 minute fight in kickboxing I've ever seen in my life. Absolutely fantastic. And Van Nostrand, I'm ready for him to take on Robin van Roosmalen. Even if he loses, he's going to make it a heck of a fight against Robin, who's been nothing but dominant at either 55 or 45. So I'm excited, and this kid is man, he's just fun to watch. And that in 1 minute showed you what Kevin Van Nostrand is all about. And that's all he needed on Friday night.
A weekend of resurrection fights, right?
Yeah. And the thing was, it wasn't so much like he was out of it from the knockdown. Obviously, throwing a knee, you're off balance. But just the fact that all that happened within 1 minute is just insane. And for a fight that was scheduled for 5 3-minute rounds. So Kevin Van Nostrand, big ups to him. Then we got Gullard 49 this week,
right?
Huh?
We had an upset as well, right, with the ladies.
Yes. Oh, dude, thank you for bringing that up. I forgot. Mexon beat Tiffany Van Soest, which I did not see coming. I'm being honest. I know Mexon had a lot of hype coming in there, has a very good record, but I thought Tiffany, with her power, was going to be able to get by her, and she wasn't. I thought Mexon she was throwing the more output. I think Tiffany was maybe sitting back a little too much, maybe kind of waiting on that power, and it kind of hurt her a little bit. I think she was kind of maybe waiting for some opportunities, and Mexon really wasn't giving her those huge opportunities. And so definitely an upset's a source. I think we're going to see a rematch. It's not like Mexon absolutely dominated Tiffany Van Soest or something like that. I think it was a very highly competitive match, but just little things like that kind of what gets you the edge in a close fight. And so I'm not surprised that Mexican guy, I had it scored for her 48-47. So I'm not surprised she walked away with the belt, but definitely an upset. Tiffany hasn't lost in quite a few years. And so I think that's going to be a huge motivator. Maybe Tiffany kind of stepping up the output, because I think that's kind of been a knock against her in Glory. I think a lot of people saw her knocking out tons of girls in Lion kickboxing where she was starting up in Lion fights. We haven't really seen that so far in Glory, just the one knockout. I think this was her 4th or 5th fight with Glory. So I think that's something that she's obviously good at, but sometimes you got to set up the knockout, you got to throw more punches instead of waiting for it. And that's just a little knock on Tiffany. That's not saying she's horribly bad or anything, but I think that was one of the things that cost her this fight against Mexon.
Yeah, well, she can learn from it and come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Glory 49, like I said, is this weekend. So this is kind of like what they did last year. So they're going to have the Super Fight Series on Fight Pass. Then they're going to have the Glory 49 main card. That's going to be Pereira against Belgari for the middleweight championship. And then that goes into the pay-per-view card, which is going to be Rico Verhoeven against Jamal Ben Sadiq for the heavyweight championship. So basically it's going to start at, I think, 11:30 Eastern and then go on till about 6 or 7. So if you really love kickboxing like I am, you're going to have a great day of kickboxing. And it's going to be fantastic. I'm super excited. I don't know if I'm ordering it yet, at least live. I might order it the next day or something, but I'm strongly considering because I just love I love seeing Rico Verhoeven that much. So I'm very excited. So that's what's going on with Glory 49, Glory 49 Redemption, and all that stuff going on if anyone wants that information. But it's going to be fantastic, and this kind of is going to end the year for Glory, which I think was probably their biggest year to date with their biggest star in Rico Verhoeven. And do you really think, despite Jamal beating Rico many years ago, you see Rico Verhoeven losing so far? He has been nothing but dominant, 14-1 so far in the Glory ring. Do you think that ends on Saturday night, Kayla?
Do I think that? I mean, I'm gonna take your word for it. If he's 14-1 and you're a believer, then yeah.
All right. Let's see here. All right, let's see. Hang on. I was going to go to UFC Fresno. Last one I went to was Rousey and Ngannou in the nosebleed seats. This time it'll be a few rows. That's a question from Jeremy. Jeremy, enjoy. I had a great time sitting in high-level seats for Detroit. So I imagine if you're just going to be a few rows there in Fresno, you're going to have a lot of fun. So thanks for the comment there.
Have a good time.
You'll be back on. We'll be back on next week, if that's what you're wondering. We got a few more minutes here. We're going to wrap up the show talking about UFC Fresno, but we will be back on next week here on MMA World. Once again, my computer screen, I'm trying to get to unfreeze here. I don't know if you can bring up the full card in front of you, Kayla, here for the 6 fights. I want to run down them real quickly, and we'll pick them here. Gotta love technology. I'm hitting Control Alt Delete. It ain't working, people. I checked my mouse; it's plugged in, so I'm not sure what happened there. So,
all right. So we have. Let me see. UFC Fresno. Jeremy, which fight are you, since you're going to be there live? Which fight are you looking forward to the most? All right. Yeah, I have it pulled up here, so we can kind of go over the main card here. So it starts off with. We have Benito
thank you,
Lopez.
Phil.
I'm sorry?
Phil said, I like you guys. I said, thank you, Phil. And yeah, we'll be back on next week.
Yeah, so we have Albert Morales versus Benito Lopez. And I did a little bit of research on these guys. So Benito Lopez, he was on looking for a fight, and this is actually his debut. Morales is about 4 fights in. So fairly new guys with the promotion. I'm trying to think. I know I was reading last night.
That's at 135 or 145?
This is going to be for 135. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And I know that there's a lot of hype behind Lopez. I think that
he's going to be Lopez is going to be my pick.
Yeah.
This one. I think Morales is good, but I think Lopez. I think he's gonna open a lot of people's eyes in this one. I think he's a good fight to kick off the card. So I'm gonna go on the record, even though we do picks at the end. But I'm gonna give away my pick now. I'm gonna go Lopez on that one.
Yeah, I've been reading a little bit on him, and I think that there's some hype around this guy. I think that he has had some nice performances just leading up to his pro fight. So. But yeah, 2 young guys looking to obviously make a statement and build their names in here. So that's always nice to start off the main card. 2 hungry guys. The next one is going to be Eric Anders versus Marcus Perez. Let me see what I have on these guys.
What weight class? That's 170?
That is going to be for 185.
185, okay.
Yeah. And so it looks like here, Marcus Perez... Both are undefeated. Anders, he had a powerful debut, a TKO. Let me see who he last fought. Again, fairly new guys in the promotion. I think that's kind of what we're going to get with this card is, with this fight night, we're going to get some of these new up-and-comer guys that everyone's excited about. Yeah, so his debut was just in July. He had a first-round KO. So yeah, that should be an exciting one to see these guys bang. Let me see if Jeremy knows any
Yeah,
facts
I'm
on
trying to get my
he's
mouse back
excited about.
hooked up, so that's why I left the screen purposely there. But yeah, I think that's going to be another fight. I think that's kind of the theme of this card, especially coming off a big pay-per-view and heading into a big pay-per-view event like UFC 219. We're going to have a lot of young up-and-coming guys, and also just not being in a huge market. No offense to Fresno, but not a huge market. So we're going to get a lot of these up-and-comer fights. So that one at 185, first one at 135. What's the third fight there on the main card?
The
Kayla?
third fight, this one I'm actually pretty excited about. It's going to be Scott Holtzman versus Daryl Horscher. They're both going to be, this is a 155 fight. I was watching some of their fights last night. Holtzman, let me see, he is
Big fan of Scott Holtzman, the hot sauce.
the hot
I've
sauce,
interviewed
yes.
a few times myself, former XFC champion, and he's a guy that's kind of been a little up and down so far in the UFC. He's taken on some decent level of competition. I think he's a guy that sometimes he relies too much on his wrestling, and sometimes it doesn't pan out. And other times he's able to outstrike guys that are kind of mediocre. So he's kind of been up and down. He's still a younger guy. I think he does have some talent. It's really just kind of what Scott Holtzman shows up, because I think he kind of has been a little up and down so far in his career. But typically a guy that I wouldn't say is a boring fighter, but a guy I think that is definitely looking to try to make a name for himself here in the lightweight division. And always a guy I look forward to seeing, because he usually is entertaining, like I said.
Yeah, I was watching his fight, his most recent fight, which was back in April against Michael McBride, which I think Michael McBride is a pretty big BJJ guy. And
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty impressed with his performance. He was able to, really have nice movement there, pretty good defense. I think he gave up his back once, but pretty good defense against Michael McBride. And as far as Horscher, what they were saying is he's got a lot of power in his hands, but he also, unfortunately, was in a motorcycle accident. So he's just been recovering after some knee injuries. But both guys, like you said, I think just trying to use this card to build their name and build themselves within the rankings. And it should be a good one, just because, I don't know, these cards to me always end up delivering, just because I feel like they kind of know that after 218, they might not be getting as much hype, as much viewing, but those are the guys that want to stand out and make the performances. So we usually get some pretty gritty fights, I've noticed.
Absolutely. So what we got
The
going on
next
after that?
one here is we have a fight in the 135 pound division, number 7 against number 8. We have Marlon Moraz. I'm probably not saying that right.
Moraes, I think.
Moraes. Against Aljamain Sterling, Funk Master.
Oh, okay. All right. Now I know some of these guys. I apologize. Some of the guys I don't know, but I can break this one down. Kayla's going to give her opinion. Just thought Marlon Moraes is definitely the better striker. There's no denying that. Okay, I think that's clearly apparent. This guy, coming from World Series of Fighting, trains with those guys over in New Jersey, the Mark Henry camp, the Frankie Edgars, the Edson Barbosas, the Corey Andersons, the Eddie Alvarez's of the world, and I think it's just a fantastic striker. Aljamain is developing into a good striker, but he's not quite there yet. Very much still a wrestling-based fighter, and he does have some good submissions as well. If this fight stays standing, I think Aljamain is going to have a really tough time rattling or doing something to affect Marlon Moraes. Even though Sterling has some solid stand-up, he's not a guy that's knocking a lot of people out. He's not a guy that I would say is an elite striker, whereas I would say Marlon Moraes is. Going to the ground, I think maybe Sterling has showcased more of his grappling, but I don't know if he's necessarily the better grappler. I think Marlon Moraes does a good job of using his wrestling or using his grappling in reverse, keeping the fight standing. And I feel like if Sterling can't get this fight to the ground, I think that's going to have a negative effect on him, because I think that's something he should do and would want to do, because you got to take Moraes out of his comfort zone, and that's tying him up, that's trying to put him against the cage, and that's being on top of him. and letting him carry your weight for 15 minutes. So this is a huge test for Aljamain Sterling. He's obviously coming off the biggest win in his career, beating former bantamweight champion Renan Barão. So this now taking out Marlon Moraes, that puts Sterling in a very good position to be close to fighting for a championship. And for Moraes, yeah, he did get by, his last fight, John Dodson, not that long ago in Virginia. Very close fight, kind of a controversial decision. I think a lot of people actually had Dodson winning that fight. I actually did think Dodson beat Moraes, but the judges gave it to Marlon, and I think so far that fight was better for Marlon. It was better than his first fight against Rafael Assunção, where I didn't think we saw the best Marlon Moraes, and we got to see it kind of in that second fight there against Dodson. We saw a little better evolution, and I think taking on Sterling, no offense to John Dodson, but I think is just a tad step down. This is saying as a guy who likes Aljamain Sterling, but I think John Dodson is such a crazy matchup nightmare with his speed and striking. Regardless of whether you think he won or not, it was a close fight. It was not a dominant victory by John Dodson in any means, or wouldn't have been a dominant victory by any means had the judges gave it to him. But I think this time around, I feel like Sterling has to do a lot more right to get the win than Marlon Moraes does. And
I agree.
Long, I believe.
No, I completely agree, and I think that, like you're saying, it's just it's going to be down to the styles and who can dominate. Whether it be Aljamain with his wrestling or Marlon with his stand-up game there. But I think that it's going to be an important fight just for this division because they're ranked 7 and 8. Depending to see on who can capitalize and defeat the other one in their game, it's going to just kind of move them within the rankings and get them closer to those top 5 guys. And just to see kind of where they've evolved too. If, with their training with Aljamain Sterling being such a young guy too, if, he stepped up, like you said, with his striking, we need to keep seeing him compete against guys to see how much he's evolving. So that'll be an important fight. I hope it's not going to be one that's kind of more on the boring side, like you said. If Aljamain is going to try and just
it could be. It does have that potential, but I hope it isn't.
I hope so too.
And is that the co-main, or is there another?
That is not the co-main. The co-main is going to be. Oh yeah, okay. So we have Jason Knight versus Gabriel Benitez.
Oh boy, Jason Knight. I'd love to see Jason Knight perform.
I love Knight. I'm a fan.
He's coming off the fight against Ricardo Lamas, right?
His last fight was,
which was his first loss in the UFC.
Right. Yeah. I believe that. Yeah, Ricardo Lamas back in July, first round. I'm trying to remember back on that fight. I almost feel like he was just a little too eager.
Yeah, he was coming forward, being aggressive as Jason,
which we love about him.
Yeah. But yeah, kind of got caught by a guy that's definitely has some power, and a guy you would say is a little more basic, not as flashy in his stand-up game in Ricardo Lamas. And Ricardo was able to land some of those power punches kind of down the pipe, and Jason Knight wasn't able to recover. But obviously, also the first time Jason Knight had taken on an elite level fighter at 145 pounds too. So I think getting a guy in Gabriel Benitez, no offense to Mr. Benitez, but I think Jason Knight is going to give you a tough night. He's been pretty good so far in his career. He is 3-2 so far in the UFC. He lost to Enrique Barzola in his last fight back in May. Does own some good wins over Clay Collard and Sam Sicilia. So this is a guy that does have some talent. But you're taking on a guy who I think is on the cusp of being an elite level featherweight in Jason Knight. And I think who really wants to prove, not that it was a fluke losing to Ricardo Lamas. I think he wants to prove that, yeah, he's still relevant in this division. And so I expect to maybe even see a more aggressive Jason Knight, if that's even possible, Kayla. The what they call him, Hick Diaz. I'm excited. I'm excited to see Jason Knight perform, and I'm looking for a bounce back performance. And this guy blends crazy striking with great jiu-jitsu, and I'm looking forward to it. I think a perfect guy to be in the co-main event.
Yeah, I think that this is a great co-main event. I'm also excited about Jason Knight. He's just so sneaky and swift with his transitions and sweeps and scrambles and really creative too. I think, like you said, it's going to be a bounce back performance. But the more that I looked into Benitez too, he's not someone to completely sleep on. I think he is. I know it says here from what I'm reading, he's wrestling on a weekly basis with Daniel Cormier, and he himself has some ground game experience and BJJ experience. But I favor Jason Knight too without giving away our predictions, just because I think, like you said, he's on another level and going to be one of the top guys in the division the more he proceeds through.
Now I have my computer back working again, Phil. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for those. And let's get to the main event here. Cub Swanson against Brian Ortega, T-City. I think this is just going to be an incredible main event. I think it's going to end in a finish. I think because it is a 5-round fight and not a 3, I think we're going to see a finish at some point. But I think it's going to be 3rd or 4th round. I think standing up, I would say Cub is probably a little better. I think has a little more power than T-City. But T-City, I think, has really developed his stand-up game. I think his last fight, I think, really showed the evolution of his stand-up game. Going to the ground, Cub is a pretty good grappler. I mean, he's been training with Greg Jackson for years. So I don't think he's going to be, surprised at anything that Brian Ortega is going to throw up at him, that it goes in the ground. But just pure submission for MMA, you have to favor T-City because he's done it, and he's done it against good level grapplers. And he's also done it in situations where you kind of almost knew what was coming, and he did it anyway. And I think that's the sign of a really great submission guy, is that you're able to pull things off that people know you're going for, and you do it anyway. His nickname's T-City for Triangle City, and yet people still take down and sit in his guard, is mind-blowing to me. Because why would you do that? Go look at his last fight. What was his opponent thinking? I mean, I understand you're kind of getting beat up, but shooting in, it was just so much worse, and then you lost the fight. So while Cub Swanson's probably a little better than Brian Ortega's last opponent, the submission game is something to look out for, because regardless of how good Cub Swanson is, I think T-City has really developed under that 10th Planet style, much like Jason Knight, who also is a 10th Planet guy too. They really know how to use their jiu-jitsu well for MMA. And I think that's one of the reasons why Brian Ortega is so effective with the submissions, is because he comes from that style. And I think that's the X factor in this fight, because even though I think Cub can go into those deep waters, can, stand top, can do it, does he really want to, and should he really do it? No, you shouldn't. Keep this fight standing. Do what you have to do. We know you got great stand-up. You proved in your fight with the Korean Superboy that you can still throw, you can still bang, and you can still be very effective and technical on your feet. And I think you got to keep it there. And I think the longer you keep it there, you also have a chance of wearing out Brian Ortega, a guy who I think is more conditioned for jiu-jitsu. The more grappling, he could do that all day. But you add in having to do a lot of stand, then maybe a little grappling, that's when you can maybe catch Brian Ortega being a little fatigued and possibly get a knockout on the ground. But you got to work it. You can't just go right in for the takedown. And I also got to give the edge in the 5-round fight main experience to Cub Swanson. He's been in a few main events. He's gone 25 minutes. And so I think from that standpoint, you got to give a slight edge. Also, the longer this fight goes, you have to favor the Greg Jackson fighter in Cub Swanson.
Yeah, I mean, I read that Brian Ortega, I think, twice has fought 2 5-round fights, but I don't think that it was any time too recently. And I think that Cub himself has already been training with that title shot in mind. He was hoping he was going to get it by the end of the year, within Max Holloway. So I think he's just been training for a title fight. But I think, like you're saying, it's just a matter of, I guess, who's the smarter fighter here, if Cub makes any mistakes of it going to the ground. But, I had the pleasure of interviewing Cub earlier in the year, and I think one thing that I got from his interview is he said, after those losses against Frankie, against Max, he really was able to look back at where he's making mistakes and really be smarter about how he's going into fights. That I don't I don't think he's going to go into this fight with so much that he has on the line of possibly getting a title shot next year, on the run that he's on, that he's not going to be prepared for the takedown defenses, for, the BJJ. I don't think he's sleeping on T-City. So I'm going to favor Cub, but I think that, like you're saying, it's going to be a really good fight. I think that I agree with you. I think it's just going to be about wearing down Brian Ortega and fighting the fight smart. But it's going to be a good main event. I think this card might be one of those sleeper cards.
Absolutely. And I know we went a little bit long on the show, about a half hour long, but there was just so much stuff to cover. But thank you, everybody, for bearing with us. We're about to end right now with our picks of the main card here for UFC Fresno, starting with Benito Lopez against Albert Morales. I kind of already gave it away. I'm going with Benito Lopez in this one. What about you, Kayla?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the hype around this guy, too, and also go with Lopez.
Eric Anders against Marcus Perez. Eric Anders made a heck of a debut back this summer in Long Island, a guy that used to actually play college football, I believe, for the University of Alabama, if I'm not mistaken, and has so far transitioned very well. Someone's has to go. I think it's going to be Marcus Perez, so I'm going to go with the former college football star there, and Eric Anders.
I'm also going to go with him, too. That last TKO and just his last performance, I'm going to favor him as well.
Scott Holtzman, the hot sauce, against Daryl Horcher. I think Horcher definitely has some talent, but I think the wrestling might be a little bit of an edge there for the hot sauce, so I'm going to go Scott Holtzman in this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Horcher, from his last performance, he kind of looks like he, hesitates and starts a little slow, and I just think that Holtzman is going to overwhelm him and like you said, maybe take it to the ground and be a little bit more dominant. So I'm going to go with Holtzman as well. 3 and 3.
That's right, 3 for 3. Are we going to make it 4 for 4? Because I'm going Marlon Moraes over Aljamain Sterling.
I'm going to go with Sterling. I think that he's going to fight smart. I don't know if it's going to be the most exciting fight, but I think he's going to get him to the ground. So I'm going to go with Sterling.
Okay. Gabriel Benitez against Jason Knight. I'm definitely going with Jason Knight in this one.
Me as well.
All right, main event time. Cub Swanson against Brian Ortega. I'm very torn on this matchup because I really do think it is that close of a fight. But I'm going to go with T-City, Brian Ortega in this one to stay undefeated and go 13-0.
Oh, man. All right, well, I agree with you. It's not a toss-up, but very close, and I think I'm going to go with Cub. I just think that he has so much that he wants to accomplish, and he's on the right path, has this momentum going, so I'm a believer in Cub Swanson. I think he's going to take it. I was going to say for Cali, but they're both Cali guys. So, yeah. I'm excited about this Cali card.
And then we have Phil, a couple comments. He's going with T-City because of the man bun. So I can't argue with that. And then we had Eric saying he wants Cub to win, but he kind of seems to choke in bid situations. I think that's true. I think Cub has you can make a case he's kind of choked a couple of times in fights. Obviously, the Frankie Edward one, he didn't show up, and then he kind of didn't show up against Max Holloway. So I think there's a legitimate claim to that. So
he's reinvented himself.
Yeah, but we'll see. We'll see here. All right, she is Kayla Bailey. You can follow her on Twitter at fangirl_MMA. I'm your host at Jim Graham on Twitter, just my name. We're going to be back next week here on MMA World. And also, if you missed watching it live, it's going to be on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. So you can watch it again and again and like it and share it and tell everybody about it. So any final thoughts, Kayla, before we end the broadcast here?
No, thank you again. It's been a pleasure being on the show, Jim, and I'm excited to discuss all of the fights and competitions that we have this weekend. Another really packed weekend of MMA and kickboxing. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to watching and talking with you next week. Thank you guys for following and watching with us.
All right, we'll see you next week, Kayla.
Bye.
All right, once again, that was Kayla Bailey, my co-host. Again, follow her on Twitter and Instagram at fangirl_MMA. I'm your host, Jim Graham. Thank you to everybody that watched and tuned in this week here on MMA World. Please like MMA World. Like it, like this video, share it, like the page. Again, follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. And thank you, everybody, once again, for watching another edition of Beyond the Cage right here on MMA World.